Good morning and welcome to the National Prevention Week Virtual Community Café. My name is Alyssa Ryan. I am the Coalition Coordinator for the Brazoria County Community Coalition. I wanted to just give a brief history of National Prevention Week before we get right into our presentation. National Prevention Week is an annual health observance dedicated to increasing public awareness of and action around mental health and/or substance use disorders. NPW has three primary goals. The first is to involve communities in raising awareness of substance use and mental health issues and implementing prevention strategies while showcasing effectiveness of evidence-based prevention programs. The second is to foster partnership and collaborations with federal agencies and national organizations dedicated to improving public health. And the third is to promote and disseminate quality substance use prevention and mental health promotion resources and publications. We do have a few frequently asked questions that we wanted to share with everyone before we get started. One of the most commonly questions asked in a lot of webinars that we've been on recently is, will the webinar be recorded? This webinar is being recorded. Participants will have access to the recording as well as the presentation slides that Dr. Temple will share. All participants have been placed on mute out of courtesy just so that we can hear the presenters properly when they're speaking and clearly. When we get to the Q&A section, which our Director of Coalitions, Danielle Meyer, will moderate, if you do have a question, I will take you off of mute, or you can take yourself off of mute and ask your questions at that point. There is also a Q&A and a chat box. If you have a question while we're going through the presentation, you can place your questions in that box, and Danielle will grab them from there, and then she'll ask our presenter at the end. How can you contact the speaker at the end of today's virtual cafe? Dr. Temple's email address is jetemple, T-E-M-P-L-E, @utmb.edu. And how can you get in contact with us, the coalition staff? Our email address is coalitions, C-O-A-L-I-T-I-O-N-S, @Bacoda, BACODA.org. And all right, I would like to turn it over to Mary Beth at this time.
I am muted.
Okay. Right. I'm unmuting you. Can you? Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Have I been officially unmuted?
Yes, you have.
All right. Well, first of all, oh my gosh, I have to say good morning. And there's some people that I see that I haven't seen in a very long time. And it's really just great to see faces again. And that's what's amazing about having this opportunity. And the second big thank you goes to Dr. Jeff Temple for jumping in to help us do this. We've had other National Prevention Week activities in the past 10 to 12 years, and Jeff has stepped up to be a speaker for us several times. I remember many years ago, and I see you there, Jennifer Hart, on our screen, when you and I were leading the DFC charge for Galveston County Community Coalition, and Jeff Temple came in probably 8 years ago and did a presentation on vaping. That's how advanced his thinking is he was so ahead of the curve back then. So it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome Dr. Jeff Temple as our speaker today. I could just read off of the bio that he so graciously sent me, and I will. Dr. Temple is a professor, licensed psychologist, and founding director of the Center for Violence Prevention at the University of Texas Medical Branch. His research focuses on interpersonal relationships with a particular focus on adolescent dating abuse. His work has been funded through the National Institute of Justice, National Institutes of Health, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He has nearly 200 scholarly publications in a variety of high-impact journals, including JAMA, JAMA Pediatrics, Journal of Youth and Adolescent Pediatrics, and the Journal of Adolescent Health. He recently co-edited a book with Dr. Wolf on adolescent dating violence. He is an associate editor for the Journal of Primary Prevention and is on the editorial boards of 5 other scientific journals. Dr. Temple recently co-chaired the Texas Task Force on Domestic Violence and is now on the board of directors of the Texas Psychological Association and Texans for Safe and Drug-Free Youth. Locally, he served as the vice president of the GISD, Galveston Independent School District Board of Trustees. His work has been featured on CNN, New York Times, BBC, Washington Post, and even on the satirical website, The Onion. So yeah, that's me reading off of my iPhone because I was just being polite, but I'd much rather tell really fun stories about Jeff. And one of my favorite stories I'm gonna tell is I was at the Home Depot probably years and years and so many years ago. His kids, who are now pretty grown teenagers, they were in the shopping cart and they were on another aisle, but I recognized this voice and I listened carefully. And he was being so patient and so incredibly kind to his 2 little children who wanted every single thing at the Home Depot in the basket with them at that moment. But I never heard anybody relate to small people the way he did. And he earned the top honors of respect in my category at that moment. And from then on, every time I've ever had the privilege of interacting with him, he has just been an amazing gift to our community. And that, everybody, is what coalition work is all about. It's about those collaborations, those community partners. And without it, coalitions wouldn't be able to do what we do. And so I say thank you, Jeff, for always being such an amazing member of our coalition, always being there to do presentations for us, always being out there in the community, setting a great example for parenting, for collaborating, for civic engagement, for involvement. You are outstanding, and it's truly my pleasure to introduce you to this crowd.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Okay, let me make sure that Dr. Temple has, can you share your screen, Dr. Temple? Are you able to still?
I cannot share it while other people are sharing, so I think someone has to stop sharing.
Okay, let me stop mine. Okay, and then I'm going to switch it back to multiple participants can share, and you should be able to, okay, you should be able to share now.
All right.
Great.
Let's see, I think it's, oh, there we go. All right, does it look okay?
Yes, it does.
All right, well, thank you very, very much for that warm welcome, Mary Beth. I'm glad that was, you caught me at one of my better parenting moments. Had you heard me last night, you might have heard me telling my 17-year-old daughter to shut up, but then quickly apologizing thereafter. But seriously, thank you for that warm welcome. And I see several familiar names on here. Some folks that have helped me greatly along the way. Rita Baldwin, I think Jamie Harbuck, Neil was on here. Of course, everyone at Bacoda has been extremely nice and have done some letters of support and everything else. So thank you guys very much. Seriously, this is, like Mary Beth said, a community effort. So I couldn't have done my research without y'all's support. So thank you. So I'm going to, you could probably see where I'm going with this first slide. We're going to talk about some family resilience factors and protective factors, but it really does start with the client or us or whoever the target is of taking care of themselves first. So this is that tired saying that you know, if you're on a plane and the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself before you put it on anyone else. And, you know, I used to use that in therapy quite a bit, and patients would tell me, yeah, I've heard that 100 times. Please stop sharing that with me. So I don't do it as much in practice, but it is important, right? If we're dead or incapacitated, then we're of no use to our friends and family and community. So we do have to take care of ourselves. So you're going to see a theme throughout this presentation is is that self-care and taking care of ourselves, or having a client take care of him or herself before we could take care of anyone else. Because no matter what we teach in terms of resilience or protective factors, it's of no use. Our toolbox is of no use if we aren't ourselves in good shape. So that'll be a theme throughout today. So I am going to focus, especially in these first several slides, which, by the way, I see this is being recorded. I stole directly from the Strengthening Families website, so I apologize. Please don't sue me if you see this. So really the idea is to increase protective factors, right? So promote those while decreasing risk factors. And that's really important when you look at risk and protective factor research, because it is risk factors do not necessarily predict bad outcomes in and of themselves. It's really the lack of or the presence of protective factors that determines whether or not a risk factor predicts a bad outcome. And that's really important for the type of work that we do from a prevention standpoint, because oftentimes we can't do anything about risk factors. So sometimes we're born with different risk factors. The fact that there is systematic racism and discrimination, we are trying to do stuff about that, but we've been trying for a few hundred years, and it's taken a really long time, and we're not very good at it. So there's those. So we want to do it. We want to have policy change. We want to have these, but there are certain risk factors that are going to be there. Some kids are going to see violence in their communities. We're doing something about it. We're hoping to end it completely, but we live in reality and they're going to be exposed to violence. A lot of them are going to be exposed to violent parents. And so these are risks that a lot of parents are going to die. They're going to be, and you'll see this later in my slides, we are going to experience stressors like hurricanes, our school shootings, our global pandemics. And so these are stressors that we're going to experience. So the idea is not necessarily to eliminate all risk factors, although that would be awesome. The goal is to build up these protective factors and health promotive and resilience factors, so that when we do face risky behaviors or risky factors, that we can overcome them or even grow from them. So that's the key from today. And when we talk about families and protective factors, we really are talking about what those things in families that we can do to create and grow resilient children and parents and families. So that's really what we're looking for now. There's several protective factors that have been shown in research to work. So what do I mean by work? Again, that means that no matter the risks that families face, that these protective factors protect them from the negative parts of risk. So what we know, and again, this is from the Strengthening Families, is that there are parental resilience, and I'm going to talk about each of these to some extent in detail. So there's parental resilience, there's social connections, there's knowledge of parenting and child development, there's concrete support in times of need, and then there's social and emotional competence of children. So one important thing as we go through these is start to think about how each of these can be used on a daily basis with ourselves and with our clients and patients. So for instance, parental resilience. Oops. Okay, there we go. So parental resilience is, think about this as, managing stress, functioning well when faced with challenges, adversity, and trauma. Really, the idea about resilience can be thought of better. I think it was Dr. Katz who came up with strength in the face of adversity. So we in Galveston County have, we more than probably any other county in the country have faced adversity. So we know what this is like. We still have, it's 1900, none of us were alive, but we still have the world's worst natural disaster in American history in terms of lives lost with the 1900 storm. We have the worst man-made disaster, non-terrorist, in the U.S. history with the 1947 explosion in Texas City. And then we have Hurricane Ike. We have the Santa Fe shooting. So we have faced Harvey. So we faced some adversity. So, building that strength in the face of adversity is important. And that's what it looks like with parents as well. So what it looks like for general life stress, giving them hope and optimism and confidence, giving them the skills to solve problems, self-care, and ability to manage negative emotions. So that's what's important about that, and how it affects parenting stress. So not allowing stress to interfere with nurturing and positive attitude about parenting a child. So when we think about this, I think sometimes it's easier said than done, like not allowing stress to interfere with nurturing. I was stressed last night. I've been stressed the past 2 months, as a lot of us have. We're going to have stress. It's going to affect our ability to nurture. I think the point is, though, it's the small changes that we can make. So, for instance, there was a couple months ago where I got annoyed with my wife because she was like rubbing her belly, saying that she was hungry. And I was like, dude, don't ever do that again. That was weird. And then I realized that was that was my stress interfering with the way I would want to interact with my loved ones. And so I then apologized to her. And whenever I tell this story, she likes me to mention that I was flossing my teeth in bed about a month ago, and that was her breaking point. But then again, we made up. So stress is going to interfere with nurturing. But if we can limit the amount it interferes and come back from it with a positive attitude about relationships, I think that goes a long way. So another important part is social connections. So we want our clients to have positive relationships and provide emotional, instrumental, and spiritual support. So instrumental is, someone to drive you to the doctor's appointment. Informational is someone that you can call and talk to and share your stressors with. And then spiritual support is someone that you can, as practical as going to church with, or just someone who shares some of your ideals. So one of the important things about social connections is that we know is that it isn't how many people an individual knows, it's the quality of those relationships. So with respect to social connections, I can have 100 friends, or 1,200 Facebook friends, or 1,700 Twitter followers, which I do and I'm proud of, but that's less important than the quality of few really close friendships that I have, friends that I can call at anything, that they would do anything for me, right? And so when some of our clients don't have those type of friends, don't have those type of supportive relationships, or when you yourself don't have, then the stress that we feel are going to make it that much more difficult to overcome. And one thing that I should say, since we're talking about all this, is when I go back to this slide here, all of these interact with each other and we know that these are important in terms of preventing child abuse, preventing intimate partner violence, and that sort of thing. So that's why having these relationships are important. The downside of this is that, and we know this, is that people that are in abusive relationships, the psychological abuse that's there, one of the goals of psychological abuse is alienating people from their friends and family. So this sometimes gets taken away. So if we can help our clients ask for friendship and accepting help from others, and giving them the skills to accept help from others, and then maybe most importantly is how to make these types of connections. Sometimes when we're stressed, when we're depressed, we don't go out, so we don't have the ability to make these types of friends and connections. So it's working with our clients and being able to obtain these connections. So knowledge of parenting and child development. So this is important, and it's not a surprise that helping a parent parent more effectively is important. But it's a skill that is underappreciated. I think we often assume, especially some of us, that if we had good parents, if we had some pro-social role models growing up, maybe it's expected and it's easy, but a lot of folks don't have that. And so I think what we assume that they have, that they know certain parenting things and about child development, and, you know, that kids cry a lot, and that a 3-year-old doesn't want to share their toy, and that's okay because they're 3 years old. And so giving them some of that basic information about child development, about what parenting means, goes a really long way. And really, sometimes the best we can do is change the parenting patterns that our clients experienced as children. So you know, give them these positive parenting things and educate them. And so for one instance, and I'm sharing this mainly because I like to talk about one of my studies here, but positive discipline techniques and an ability to effectively manage child behavior. And I mentioned that because I did a study a couple years ago now on corporal punishment and spanking. And so a lot of people are still under the belief that, one, that child abuse itself is okay, and that's the way that we raise our children, and, you know, and especially with spanking, you know, my mom spanked me when I was a kid, and I turned out just fine. Or kids these days are too soft and they need to be spanked and they need to be taught a lesson and all that. Well, the truth is that's not really how it works. And we know that, of course, child abuse is associated with a whole bunch of negative outcomes, but so is corporal punishment. And if you ask people, there's still, I can't remember exactly, I think it was about 70% of people still spank their children. And most all of them think that it is a proper disciplining technique, when the research is really overwhelming that it's not not only is punishment doesn't work, it actually increases the negative behavior, but it also has some of the same long-term negative effects as child abuse. In fact, there's several people that would like to put spanking as an adverse childhood experience, the ACEs that you guys have heard of. So we did the study, and we looked at whether or not corporal punishment was associated with perpetrating dating violence later in life. And I was spanked as a child, so I'm not completely saying that, look at me, I'm this perfect person. I even tried to spank my kid once, Quinn, my daughter who's now 17, who I love and is perfect, but she laughed at us, and so we never really did it again. But parenting is hard, and sometimes that happens, and so I'm not disparaging anyone who has been spanked or has spanked. This is kind of part of society and what people think is normal and okay. It's not. And so with this study, I have done studies on sex and violence and drugs and sexting and firearms and everything else. And I have never gotten hate mail like I did with this study on spanking. And it was probably my fault in the sense that I didn't really talk to the media as well as I should have. So this was on CNN and USA Today and The Atlantic, and what I did wrong was I think I just kind of took it for granted. Yes, if you're spanked as a kid, you're more likely to perpetrate violence as an adult. That was even after controlling for child abuse. So this in and of itself was important in predicting later physical violence. So where I messed up is I should have said, look, it does make it more likely, but it doesn't guarantee it by any means. If 10 kids, none of them are spanked, one of them will go on to perpetrate dating violence. And then you have another set of 10 kids with all of them being spanked, well, then 2 of them will go on to perpetrate dating violence. So that's 100% increase, but really it's still, quote unquote, only 20%, or 10% or 20% of those kids are going on to perpetrate dating violence. And I wish I would have done it that way, so I wouldn't have gotten so much negative, bad hate mail. I got one, there's one site, the I Effing Love Science. It's a pretty popular Facebook thing that has multiple millions of followers. And they posted the study, and within 45 minutes, there were 30,000 comments, and 28,000 of them were BS, BS, bullshit, bullshit, BS, BS. And I read all of them because I guess I have low self-esteem. But I wanted to show a few things here. We got this Robert Miller, who was a little whipping boy who conducted that study, LOL. That was me, Robert, and the LOL doesn't make it better. And then we have Ted French here. The author of this article needs to be spanked. Ted with 2 Ds. I wouldn't trust him unless someone on this call has 2 Ds in their name. So that was a little bit of my life for about a month. But going back to family and parental stress is giving them the knowledge to parent, getting them to parent more effectively. And that includes what disciplining looks like. All right, but mainly I just wanted to use that as an excuse to share my study with y'all. All right, so the next one is concrete support in times of need. So if we look at this is basically every family has basic needs, right? So that help them provide the best environment. This includes food, shelter, medical care, and sometimes families need specialized services or when they fall into a crisis that prevents them from being able to provide these basics for children. So, you know, I think especially now in the pandemic and with the 20+% of unemployment, we're going to have a lot of families in crisis, a lot of families that are going to need support from what you guys do and what other folks do, and to do this. And I think one of the things that we have to do is show them that services exist, show our clients, and then advocate for these services, and all at the same time decreasing the stigma associated with seeking these services. People don't want to be poor, right? People don't want to access these services. No one does, despite what a segment of the population thinks about poor people. People do not want to be poor. People do not want to seek help like this. So we have to advocate for them. We have to make it easy for them to access. You know, we for healthcare, for CHIP, or for any of these, it's so incredibly difficult for people to access these services, almost to the point where maybe it seems a little bit purposeful. And so we have to be there to support them and help them access these services. Well, I messed up this slide a little bit, but you can see that it's a social and emotional competence of children. So, so this is basically what we want here is for the parent is warm and consistent responses that foster strong and secure attachment with the child. So in all the research that's out there, the #1 protective factor for children is access to a pro-social adult. And what that means is not just access to an adult who's a jerk, but access to an adult who they can model, who encourages and reinforces the right social skills, sets limits. And for the child, what this looks like is self-regulation. So we talk a lot about socio-emotional learning in our schools, and I saw Trina was on the call, and you know, we've done a lot of this in the Galveston ISD in terms of the socio-emotional learning and getting kids to be mindful and regulate themselves, ability to form relationships and interact positively with others, and then effectively communicate. All of these are really skills that we take for granted, I think, but they're not that easy. And so one of the things that I do in my research is, and a lot of y'all know this, is this program called 4th R. So it's reading, writing, arithmetic, and the last R stands for relationships. Of course, 2 of those do not start with R, but you know, whatever. So what we do with that is we actually teach kids how to be in a relationship. So if I were to ask you guys, and I won't, but if I were to say, how many of y'all were ever taught how to be in a relationship? None of you would raise your hands. Despite the fact that this is the most important skill, it is what makes humans humans. And if we have positive relationships, I think that that is a protective factor for everything. If we want to prevent substance use and violence and bullying and risky sexual behavior, we don't have to target those things individually in silos. we just have to, just being in quotes because it's not easy, have to teach kids how to be in healthy relationships. We got to teach them not just to avoid, but teach them how to be in actually healthy, health promotive relationships. So teaching them how to apologize to someone, teach them how to break up with someone, teach them how to be assertive instead of passive or aggressive. And when we do that, we have to do it in a dynamic fashion that gets them to practice it, so that when they experience, so practice it, role play, so when they experience these difficulties out in the real world, they've already practiced it, and now they're more effective at using these skills. So that is one thing that you'll always hear me talking about, is really hammering down on healthy relationships. Okay, I'm going to move now toward, I think we're about halfway done, so I want to move toward taking care of ourselves and really, and your clients taking care of themselves. So if you'll indulge me, this is a video that if it works, if it doesn't work, no big deal, we'll go back to what we were doing. But it is about 7 minutes long, and I know that's weird to have a presentation within a presentation, and truth be told, you'd be much better served if this next presenter was doing the presentation instead of me. But since she cost a lot of money to bring, and I know because I tried, the next best thing is 7 minutes of a TED Talk that really will affect the way that you live. It has me, and I hope it works because it's pretty rad. Let's see now. Let me see if I can get this. All right. And someone's going to have to tell me if it doesn't work. I'm just going to assume it works if no one tells me anything.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? Mm-hmm. How about a moderate amount of stress? Who's experienced a lot of stress? Yeah, me too. But that is not my confession. My confession is this. I'm a health psychologist, and my mission is to help people be happier and healthier. But I fear that something I've been teaching for the last 10 years is doing more harm than good, and it has to do with stress. For years, I've been telling people stress makes you sick. It increases the risk of everything from the common cold to cardiovascular disease. Basically, I've turned stress into the enemy. But I've changed my mind about stress. And today, I want to change yours. Let me start with the study that made me rethink my whole approach to stress. This study tracked 30,000 adults in the United States for 8 years. And they started by asking people, how much stress have you experienced in the last year? They also asked, do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? And then they used public death records to find out who died. Okay, some bad news first. People who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believed that stress is harmful for your health. People who experienced a lot of stress but did not view stress as harmful were no more likely to die. In fact, they had the lowest risk of dying of anyone in the study, including people who had relatively little stress. Now, the researchers estimated that over the 8 years they were tracking deaths, 182,000 Americans died prematurely, not from stress, but from the belief that stress is bad for you. That is over 20,000 deaths a year. Now, if that estimate is correct, that would make believing stress is bad for you the 15th largest cause of death in the United States last year, killing more people than skin cancer, HIV, AIDS, and homicide. You can see why this study freaked me out. Here I've been spending so much energy telling people stress is bad for your health. So this study got me wondering, can changing how you think about stress make you healthier? And here the science says yes. When you change your mind about stress, you can change your body's response to stress. Now, to explain how this works, I want you all to pretend that you are participants in a study designed to stress you out. It's called the social stress test. You come into the laboratory and you're told you have to give a 5-minute impromptu speech on your personal weaknesses to a panel of expert evaluators sitting right in front of you. And to make sure you feel the pressure, there are bright lights and a camera in your face, kind of like this. And the evaluators have been trained to give you discouraging nonverbal feedback, like this. Now that you're sufficiently demoralized, time for part 2, a math test. And unbeknownst to you, the experimenter has been trained to harass you during it. Now, we're gonna all do this together. It's gonna be fun for me. Okay. I want you all to count backwards from 996 in increments of 7. You're gonna do this out loud as fast as you can, starting with 996. Go. Go faster. Faster, please. You're going too slow. Stop, 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 stop. That guy made a mistake. We're gonna have to start all over again. You're not very good at this, are you? Okay, so you get the idea. Now, if you were actually in this study, you'd probably be a little stressed out. Your heart might be pounding, you might be breathing faster, maybe breaking out into a sweat. And normally we interpret these physical changes as anxiety or signs that we aren't coping very well with the pressure. But what if you viewed them instead as signs that your body was energized, was preparing you to meet this challenge? Now, that is exactly what participants were told in a study conducted at Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy and courage. Over a lifetime of stressful experiences, this one biological change could be the difference between a stress-induced heart attack at age 50 and living well into your 90s. And this is really what the new science of stress reveals, that how you think about stress matters. So my goal as a health psychologist has changed. I no longer want to get rid of your stress. I want to make you better at stress. And we just did a little intervention.
All right, let's see. Okay, I'm assuming, yeah, there we are. We're back. Cool. Thank you all for indulging me in that. I really love that because it really is, it expresses how we are all experiencing stress, and we are, especially now in the pandemic. So it's less about whether or not we experience stress, but how we experience stress. You know, I talk a lot about relationships. Like I said, oftentimes we do a bad job of teaching kids not to be in conflict. Well, that's just not accurate, because kids are parents and kids and wives and husbands and girlfriends and boyfriends. They're going to experience conflict. Conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict is part of relationships. It's part of life. So it's less about teaching them not to have conflict, but how to deal with conflict and how to manage conflict and how to grow from conflict. And so that's really what we should be teaching our clients and experiencing and talking about with our clients and each other. So I'm going to do now just talk a little bit more about stress. And, you know, we have 8 to 10 minutes. I want to have some time for questions. So a lot of this stuff you guys have heard before and seen before, but I don't think it hurts to get reminded every once in a while. So there are good stress. There's eustress, right? So there's getting married, there's buying a house, that's me with Quinn when she was a baby, with parenting. This is me, my wife and my 2 kids when they were young. That's in St. Martin, and that's traveling. And traveling is a good stress, but it is absolutely stressful. The holidays are stressful. And so starting a new job is stressful. Retiring is stressful. So all those things are stressful, but they are stress. I mean, they're good stress, but they're stress. Then we have what we call bad stress, so distress. And this is things like relationship problems. Unfortunately, things that we're going to see more often here is unemployment and not having food insecurity, job insecurity, housing insecurity. Those types of things are bad stress, distress. Of course, death is an obvious example. Medical problems, and then intimate partner violence, and then here we have what we're experiencing quite a bit, what we've experienced in terms of school shootings or Hurricane Ike or Hurricane Harvey. So all these are bad stress, distress. And of course, the one that is on all of our minds is the pandemic and all the stress that comes along with that. So those are examples of bad stress. And we have work-related stress, excessive job demands, insecurity. I think the last time I gave this talk was on work-related, so maybe that's why that one is. So we'll go to here. Not all stress is external. So it's not always something that you can say, man, that is why I'm stressed. In fact, I would say with half the patients that I see, half of them don't know why they're depressed or why they're anxious, or even more than that there's not a specific event that has caused them to be stressed. So when we start to look at that, we look at internal sources. So some of the thoughts and feelings, so fears or repetitive thought patterns, worrying about future events, unrealistic, perfectionistic expectations. So these things are not something that's happening to us. These are things that we are creating, thinking, and feeling internal to us, but stress nevertheless. So we also have behavioral patterns that contribute to stress, and that is overscheduling, failing to be assertive, procrastination. So these are things that if we can change the behaviors that we do, then we can change the amount of stress we experience. Communication with assertiveness is really important. When we talk about different styles of communication, we have passive, which is really beneficial because if you're passive, you're not going to get into arguments. You're not going to be stressed out. The downside of being passive, though, is that you get oftentimes treated like a doormat and you rarely get what you want. And oftentimes it's you don't get what you want over and over again, that then you blow up. So then there's the other side, aggressive, right? There's some really good things about being aggressive. People see you as strong and powerful. You usually get what you want. The downside of being aggressive, though, is that people don't like you and you're seen as a jerk. And maybe most important is that you're always on edge and you're always wanting to see the next fight or argument or whatever. And so that's not good for you either. So assertiveness is really where we want to be. And that is where you get the best of both worlds. You get the benefits of being passive in terms of you're not always stressed out, you avoid arguments, and you get the benefits of being aggressive in the sense that you usually get what you want, not always, but you usually do, or at the very least, you say what you want and you communicate what you want, and you've done that. And people generally like you. So that's just one example there. All right, so this is interesting. This is from last year, a couple of years ago. I bet that it has changed a tiny bit with the pandemic, But you can see that that most of the stress right now is related to kind of geopolitical concerns, which is pretty interesting. And then if you look at the top fears from last year, a couple of years ago, you can see that government is 74%, and people I love dying is 56%, which is a big change from where it was 10 years ago, where the government and pollution and that sort of stuff was not as big of our extinction of plant and animal species, global warming. So you can see all that sort of stuff has taken kind of center stage, whereas those weren't big issues 10 or 15 years ago. And maybe we need some of that stress. So this is getting back to resilience, right? So if we have enough stress, maybe it forces us to act and do stuff. And so maybe this is not necessarily bad stress for our nation to have. So here's another a scary part, or alarming part is, especially in the US, is where healthcare stress felt regardless of income. So you can see that we're anxious about healthcare regardless of whether or not we have health insurance, regardless of our income. Now, that being said, there's probably a lot of stuff going on there, but the low-income folks are maybe especially stressed about that, or maybe they don't have the luxury of being stressed out about that because they're stressed out about so much other stuff. Trying to change it, but it's not changing. What happened? There we go. All right, so I'm going to do just a couple more things, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I like this a lot, and I know you guys have heard this fight or flight thing before, but it doesn't hurt again to be reminded of it, and both with ourselves and with our clients. So we know that this fight or flight response, right? It is, stress is not bad. Again, that's a theme throughout this talk, is stress is not necessarily a bad thing. And if you look historically, evolutionary, it was a really key ingredient to our survival. It is, when we're experiencing stress back in the caveman or cavewoman days, if we experienced hunting and gathering and a bear came up to us, we want to fight or flight. So we want to fight that bear, or we want to run like hell away from that bear for survival, right? And so what happens during these stressful times is our body gets ready to fight the bear or to run away from the bear. And so what that means is the blood rushes from our core into our extremities, into our arms, into our legs, to give us the ability to fight or flight. Absolutely important, evolutionarily necessary. The problem is that now in modern society, we are facing a bear every minute. So it's traffic jams, it's someone cutting us off, it's checking our phone, it's and I'm guilty of all this, by the way, so I'm not trying to say I'm holier than thou or anything. But we are experiencing the stress continuously, and what that does is it causes disease, right? So and this has been shown that it is going to increase negative mental and physical health reactions. So, how do we what do we deal with that? Well, we have to be more mindful. We have to learn coping strategies. We have to take care of ourselves. That means exercising, eating better, having positive relationships, sleeping normal, regular hours, and all that old and boring and tired stuff that we hear every day. But it is really important, and it is about taking care of ourselves. And whatever that means to you, if that means watching a movie, binging Tiger King, but we especially in this time, in this pandemic, we need to take care of ourselves. We have to put that oxygen mask on ourselves before we take care of our clients, before we take care of other people. So thank you. I finished with 9 minutes, so I hope that's enough time for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to someone else, and then, but I'll still be here to talk. All right, hold on. I don't know how to stop sharing. I said I was going to, but.
Well, thank you, Dr. Temple. We are going to take questions from the audience. We have 2 so far. So first of all, thank you so much for that. Thank you for taking your time with us today. As the Director of Coalitions, I'd like to say thank you to Alyssa and Mary Beth for collaborating as 2 coalitions and able to have you speak today. I have to say that Alyssa came up with the virtual cafe idea, and I said, hey, why don't you collaborate with Mary Beth and see if she can get a speaker? And I'm not kidding you, within 15 minutes, we had you on the line. And so thank you, Mary Beth, for having such great collaborating partnerships that it takes that long, 15 minutes, to get someone like Jeff on the line and have him here today. So again, many thanks to our team there. So whoops, I just lost my chat box. Hold on just a sec. So we start with a question from Jennifer Hart. Hi, Jennifer. We miss you so much. It says, what are the top 3 needs you are seeing from patients and family during this time of dealing with COVID and navigating parent and guardianship?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jennifer. Thank you, and always nice to hear and see you. I'm going to limit I think there's probably someone else that can answer this better than I can. So I'm going to limit my answer to what I know, and that's about partner violence and child abuse. And what we know and what we are seeing is an increase in both of these with the recent pandemic. And it's scary in the sense that the idea is to stay home. And for some of us, that's fine. But for those that are experiencing child abuse or domestic violence, that ends up being a whole nother problem in that they often can't seek support or can't extricate themselves from the abusive relationship because of the stay-at-home orders. So it's much more difficult to seek help. We know that calls are starting to increase. Initially, what scared us a whole bunch with child abuse is the #1 reporters of child abuse are teachers. And since kids are no longer in school, that the amount of reporting had gone down dramatically, which means that the child abuse didn't go down. Child abuse probably increased, if anything, but less kids were able to be protected. So I think that's one of the big ones. The second one, and I'm going to limit it to 2 here, is the folks on the front lines, the violence prevention and intervention or the substance abuse prevention and intervention folks are kind of being, these are first responders. These are essential workers that are not really part of the national conversation, and they should be. These folks are often underpaid and are doing work that is taxing and stressful. And so what we're seeing and we're going to see is high turnover rates and a whole bunch of stress with these folks. So a gap is we need to reach them. We need to provide them with services, healthcare services, mental health services, and we need to reach them via telehealth. So that's actually one thing that we're working on. One of my colleagues, Dr. Wood, who's in the Center for Violence Prevention, not my wife, who's also last name is Wood. So we're working on creating webinars to reach out to these frontline workers to teach them how to do telehealth with their patients, but more importantly, giving them access to mental health services via telehealth. Thank you. That was a long answer.
Thank you, Dr. Temple. So our second question comes from Danielle Campbell. Hi, Danielle from U of H. It's another collaborator that we collaborate with on the line. Can you give us some details on teaching children to be in healthy relationships? Age range, how is the message received? Any classes for parents in the future? And I think if I could second this, it was my question, in this age of virtual, and not just COVID-19 virtual, but we know that the kids at this age group have virtual relationships. And so, can you give us some tips on teaching children to be in healthy relationships in this virtual age?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start a little bit backwards in getting to parents and reaching parents. Right now, my programs do not have this component. I think it's a major deficit in the programs that I'm working with, and something that we are working on. I'll say historically and currently that we as healthcare providers or researchers, we do not do a good job of reaching parents. We do them in kind of the traditional ways where we expect parents to come to us. And that's not really fair when the parents that we want coming to us often have 2 jobs, don't lack transportation, anything like that. We need to do a better job of going to them and reaching them. There's a researcher out of UT Austin that has done a great job, Ruben Para Cardona, and his work is really on reaching parents is light years ahead of others. And so we need to do a better job of that. In terms of reaching the age range for the kids, we have, what I'm doing right now is a randomized controlled trial with 7th graders throughout Houston and Fort Bend school districts. And so we've already done the intervention with 7th grade, and now we're following them up. The kids are currently in 9th grade. And so we're testing the efficacy of that so we'll have a better answer for you in a year or 2 on how effective it was. But in terms of how it's received very well, and both by the kids and the teachers. We've done focus groups and qualitative interviews, and it continually receives positive feedback. One of my favorite examples is this teacher was teaching it, and there was a lot of laughter, and it's more dynamic. There's kids participating, and the teachers would go by, man, you guys are having too much fun in that class. You're not really teaching, are you? And all this, and then about a month later, that same teacher came by and said, okay, I need to learn what you're doing, because these kids are starting to use the right languages and are starting to relate better. So it's being well received. So we have it middle school and high school, but there are other programs that are really good, such as PBIS, positive behavioral support, that is for younger kids. I actually think we need healthy relationship education from birth until death. We could all use it, and so I need to do a better job of that generally. Last part, in terms of reaching kids during COVID, I think there's a lot of people scrambling right now to put their relationship programs or violence prevention or substance use prevention programs online. There are some out there. There's It's Your Game is a good program. It mostly deals with pregnancy prevention and prevention of risky sexual behavior. That's fully online. There's a Me and You program that is online, and that prevents dating violence. And then what we're doing now with 4th R is we're in that boat where we're rushing to put it online, but trying to do it in an evidence-informed manner. So I guess the short answer is we're not doing too well at it right now, but I think we're trying to reach kids during this COVID and just reaching them virtually. Oh, I will say one other thing that a lot of people have on this call are familiar with. We have a texting campaign that was developed by Dr. Gio Wright, and that is reaching kids where they are. So all of them have cell phones, and we have a healthy relationship text message that they get a few times a week. And I like it because it's meeting them where they are. And so it's kids that, they get a text message and they read about a healthy relationship, or we have a thing called Fact or Crack. And so they can say whether or not that relationship, something about an unhealthy behavior is an example of abuse. And they say fact or crap, and then we respond to it. And what I like about this is that they read it, and before they're pissed off that they've read it. So that's a good thing. And then the other thing I like about it is it can respond to emergencies. At Texas City, when they had that suicide a couple years ago, we were able to get in there, and then with the pandemic, we were able to give resources. After the Santa Fe shooting, we developed a resource page, and so I see people asking how to do it. I'm going to put that in here. Just text the word relationship to 53740. I think that's right. If not, just email me, and I'm almost positive that's right, though. You can email me, and I can get you the right one.
And Jeff, what's the age of that what's the age range for the texting?
Middle school through high school. We actually are working on a parent one with that as well. So we have developed it, but we haven't put it out yet. And but we do suggest that parents and I'm wanting to make sure that's the right number, but I think it is. I'm going to look up real quick while I'm doing this.
Is there a website or something that we can go on so
Yes.
we can share some of the?
Yes, thank you for saying that. And then the right number will be on there as well.
That wasn't a question about that.
There it is. Oh, thanks, Neil. Awesome. Thanks. Oh, Rita just privately contacted me. Thanks, Rita. And I privately responded to you, so I need to put that into everyone. All right.
So Jeff, that 53740 was correct?
I think so. Was that right, Neil? I'm sorry that I don't have that right away knowing. Oh, I do have a, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
37420.
53, what is it?
37420.
Oh, I was way off. 37420.
537.
Nope, just
Oh,
37.
37. Oh, I was up too. 37420. So relations,
Relationship.
relationship.
Yeah, 37420. Yes, that's the right one, and I apologize for giving the wrong one initially. So if you text relationship to 37420, you'll be entered into it. And if you're an adult, which most of you are, it'll you'll have to just answer the first few questions as if you're in high school. But we actually suggest that parents do this as well and open up conversation between kids and parents so that they get the same messages. I will say, let's say that, yeah, oh, and the texting campaign, there is a promo graphic for it. And more than that, and working with the folks at GISD and the Causeway Galveston, they have t-shirts. And I'm pretty sure anyone could get a t-shirt with that graphic and the number on it. And Texas City, y'all too, and Brazoria, anyone else can get it. I think we have a whole bunch of t-shirts that are about to have there. Let's see. Also, there was another question I want to say. Oh, college-age kids. Yes, Danielle, thank you so much for asking that. The person I just brought along, Dr. Leela Wood I recruited her, I stole her from University of Texas, and she is really interested in college climate, and we are in the process now. We have a study going on where we are adapting our 4th R for college students. And I think what's really interesting, and this probably won't surprise many of you on this call, is that 18-year-old college students don't look a whole lot different from 17-year-old high school students. So a lot of the same stuff that we are doing with high school students works with colleges. We do have to adapt it and make it less stupid and more relevant to them. The big thing that we're having a difficult with, Danielle and others, is figuring out where to implement in college. You know, they have, it's not as easy in high school. They're not as captive, so to speak. So, you know, there's fraternities, sororities, there's dorms. We've gone through quite a bit, but that's the, yes, and the Pan-Hellenic Council, yes, absolutely. And so we tried, and student services as well, and we have done a good job, but it is difficult. It's not as easy. What ends up happening is the kids that don't need information about relationships are the ones that typically join and participate, and we don't reach the kids who need it more. I'll also say that we need to do a better job of reaching community college students. They have often been ignored in these health services. So, I think that we can do a better job in that. And thank you all for the information that what we can do in colleges, like freshman orientation, first year seminars. Hey, Danny, nice seeing you. Yes, to all those things we can do. The problem is that a bigger the dose, the better the response. And a lot of these things are one-offs. And so it's difficult to get the relationship messages that we need in those one-offs. Better than nothing probably, but it's not going to be as effective if we do that. All right, I think I'm over time, so I'm worried about I don't want to. All right, I'm done.
I do want to draw attention to the chat box. Dr. Temple left the website www.utmb.edu/violence prevention. So that's noted there. I want everybody to have a chance to check that out before we end today. I am going to give it back to Alyssa. This is her meeting today. And so again, thank you so much, Jeff. We really appreciate your time. Thank you everyone for coming and asking questions and participating. So Alyssa?
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Dr. Temple. Thank you, Mary Beth, and for everyone who participated in our virtual community cafe this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. On the screen now is some contact